Now, the Trail Talk Podcast. Anything and everything snowmobiling. From UpstateSnow.com. Here's meteorologist Rich Lupia.
It's Trail Talk Podcast. It is January 11th, 2022. And my guest here on the Trail Talk Podcast is the former owner of UpstateSnow.com, actually the only other owner of UpstateSnow.com besides yours truly. He is the owner of MapledaleMotors.com in Barneveld, New York, Dave Gleasman, live in the flesh. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Rich. You?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate you joining me for this podcast here. It's January. The snow is finally flying. We're finally starting to get some trails open. It just seems like the snowmobile seasons are getting shorter and shorter over the last couple of years in particular here. From your experience with the clubs, how is that playing into the clubs in terms of trail signage? There was the later hunting season for the southern zone, which affected you guys at Penn Mountain, this past winter. Go a little bit more into stuff with the club and how that affected you guys.
Yeah, the last couple of years. I mean, it's been 6 to 8 weeks of riding and actual grooming. If we're lucky, it feels like the late hunt this year definitely kept things at bay. We were trying to let the hunters have their season. You don't want to be out there while they're doing their thing. But we get along with everybody and try and get what signs we can up. And, a few little spots will get filled in here. I know just the last few days. And just in time for a fresh blanket of snow this morning.
Well, one good thing about the good blanket of snow that we just got is that it's going to get us out, on the trails. Many of us are going to get our first rides in coming into Martin Luther King weekend, and especially going into the second half of January. For those that are going riding for the first time, especially in some areas where the trail system is just open, there really wasn't a whole lot of base, and now we got all this lake effect white gold sitting on the ground. What would be your advice to the families, to the first time riders especially, and those just getting out for the first time, even though it's already mid-January?
Well, first thing, always check with the club where you're riding. I saw a few people go by the shop today out riding. I don't think Deerfield's open yet behind us. I know Penn Mountain, they're still checking gates. There's animals out in Quaker Hill, so just because there's snow on the ground doesn't mean everything's ready to go. And I would also advise you, if you're going to check with the club if they're open, check to see where they need your help too. As always, there's the same 10 people that do a lot of stuff, and they need help. Every club needs help. Penn Mountain and every other club in the state, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, that is totally the truth. That is totally the truth. And one trend that I've seen in clubs the past couple of years, especially with my close relationship with Saratoga and with Turin Ridge Riders and Southern Tug Hill, there's a lot of people in clubs now. These clubs are not local anymore. A lot of the people that are officers in the clubs and a lot of people that are doing work in the clubs, they have second homes up in these areas where the clubs are, and some of them are driving in from 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours away, and still taking care of all the club business up here, and people expect them to be local. That is not something that we saw 10, 20 years ago around here.
No, we don't have a bunch of that in our club, but I know the circumstances in some of the other clubs, and that's it's going to be almost a nerve-wracking feeling for those guys being hours away, trying to keep an eye and a hand on what's going on. But it's really just common sense and kind of neighborly love. Like, hey, the trails aren't going to open until everything's done and everything's safe. So if you want to see it happen, lend a hand.
Absolutely, for sure. Now, one thing that we talked about the last time that you were on the podcast, we talked about some really good snowmobile stories. One of the greatest things about snowmobiling is getting together with you, with Spadero, with with all kinds of other guys. There's like 10 people that have just popped into my mind right now. Darrin, Jim, Bill, Gordy. I just think of all the guys that I've gone riding with the past couple of years up there, and obviously it takes a lot of planning going into it. I want you to give me some snowmobile stories, especially from the last few years, of times to where it was just better than expected and times to where literally the wheels just fell off.
Well, for me personally, my son will be 5 next month, and I've had a lot of fun sharing snowmobiles and the sport with him. He's got a little Z120, and we were out making some tracks today. That for me has been just icing on the cake. I love snowmobiles, but to do it with him and some of our other friends that have children, so we kind of do like the boys do a no work Wednesday. We all go ride and try and put on a couple 100 miles. And Sunday is the family ride. We do 20 miles an hour. We try and incorporate breakfast or lunch somewhere and hot cocoa. And that's been a lot of fun. I never would have guessed you could have had that much fun just tooling around your local trails. So that's been a lot of fun. Last year I did one big run that was a lot of fun from Barneveld up to Forestport, across C4H over to Oxbow Inn, had lunch there, and then up to Speculator, Indian Lake, over Moose River Plains, back through Old Forge and down the tracks. I think it was 220 some miles with a good group of guys. That was a lot of fun, and it was a really nice day.
The epic loop. That's the one that I want to do. The epic loop. From before sunrise to after sunset and looping all the way through. And the thing is, C4H, that's the backwoods trail going through North Lake and going all the way down, coming into Haskell's from the backside. That's remote back there. That's one of the most remote areas that you can get in the state. You think Powley is remote. You think Moose River Plains is remote. Even on some of the dead-end trails, you're not far from people. You go on C4H, you're all alone.
Yeah, it's there's some pretty neat scenery back there, but it is remote and maintenance is little. I know in the last couple of years they've added some runs, I think, to make that a little more groomable and wider, but it's still more or less a goat path through the woods with a bunch of moguls. It was steep and deep the day we went through it, and it was fun. It was fun to experience it. Believe it or not, as much as I've ridden here in New York, I had never been on C4H. Till last year, so it had always been on the list of things to do or places to go see. But really neat if you're ever in that neighborhood and want to go across. Make sure you have plenty of fuel and time and go do it. It's fun.
Another one crossed off on Dave's bucket list: C4H. And check in with Ohio Ridge Riders and with Trackside for conditions on both of them and whether or not that is accessible. Just based on the snowfall that we've had right now, probably not right now. Probably need another event or two to really get that snow going up there. Now I want to pinwheel back to the family ride, the 20 miles an hour, the hot cocoa, and just tooling around back and forth, and just how much fun that is. So, is there really a ton of planning that goes into it, or do you literally just wing it?
We kind of wing it. We like to stay local on those days. I don't want to go up to Tug Hill and get in lines of traffic, and it's a little more slow pace for us on Sundays. So we'll stay, South Trenton, Marcy, Floyd, those kind of the lowest areas of the northern tier, I guess I would say, anything north of the thruway. But, it's amazing how the snow will get a little thinner through there. It's just a little more relaxing as far as taking the kids and having a good time.
All right, so tell me a little bit more about what you think the future of snowmobiling is. Now, obviously, from the weather side, we've been struggling to get the snowfall. We've been struggling to have as long of winters as we had a decade ago, much less 2 decades ago, where it seemed like snowmobile season was forever. It was literally 3-4 plus months. Now we're getting down to 6-7 weeks if we're lucky. What do you see as the future of the sport, and what do you see as the greatest threat to the sport at this point in your chair in 2022?
The greatest future? I don't know. I hope people continue to ride and buy sleds. It's almost kind of a head scratcher to see the price of some of these snowmobiles. As you see, the weeks get shorter and shorter of the riding season. The winter of 2003, Mike Speculator and I rode November 6th on Tug Hill. It was a freak snowstorm, and we probably shouldn't have been out on the dirt roads, but we did. And we were riding down here the first week of April, so we had a solid 6 months of riding, which almost seems foreign now. Like, I'm not sure we'll ever see that again. As the seasons get shorter, you definitely need to get your machines ready to go and take advantage of every chance you get to go ride and make the most of it.
All right, so what about the biggest threat that you see right now? Do you think it's really the cost and the fact that the seasons are getting shorter? Do you think that that's just starting to squeeze a lot of people out?
Yeah, I don't think that, no. I think the biggest threat is trail closures. Private property seems increasingly evident every year. Someone is upset, a trail gets closed. It's a few bad apples, but it's becoming a problem, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about the bad apples out there. And we know this, the people that just brap and just go full throttle, break the trails up, just go absolutely crazy, and ride without regard, blow people off of trails. And, I've seen it out there, riding thousands of miles. I've seen it out there. I've had some close calls. Zach's had some close calls. I don't think people realize how few places this needs to happen to tick off enough of those private property owners to be able to literally get to the point to where you not only shut down trails, but potentially wipe out clubs.
Yeah. I don't know what percentage is on private property, but it's a lot in much of the state. I don't think it's even so much reckless people on the trail. I think when people go off the trail, there was just the other day somebody going around a trail closed sign, opening gates when they're not supposed to. All that just, it's not needed. It goes back to get a hold of the club. They'll let you know when the trail's open. People were out there spending their time to sign it, to make entryways and exits and really define the trail. And if you're just off playing on your own and being where you're not supposed to be, that usually gets the club a phone call from the landowner.
Yeah, almost every time. All right, so there's one final question that I have for you, especially being the former owner of Upstate Snow. What do you see as, and this is kind of I don't want to say a self-grandizing question, but you've seen the work that I've put into Upstate Snow since taking it back over. This is now my 3rd season, the 2nd time around, taking it back over and running it. And Zach and I are going to be up. We're going to get some footage. We're planning on coming up, later this winter to get some footage and to, really, help build out some nice promos and stuff. We've obviously got more and more people following us. What do you think is the best thing that Upstate Snow has going, and what do you think the best opportunity is out there?
Well, you certainly have amassed a good following on Facebook. I mean, that is certainly where a lot of people, I know myself, I'll see you in the feed and click, and that's kind of the jumping off point for probably a lot of your web traffic, I would imagine. You have good in-depth forecasts. I owned the site, but I was not the weather guy. I mean, as we all know, I simply was the one just trying to keep everything moving. But you have great forecasts. I mean, even somebody like myself who doesn't have any meteorology background or even scientific background, I enjoy reading the articles in the blog and, getting a little better understanding for what's happening and why. I really like the video and the podcast. I think that's a great way to engage people. I don't know. It's just, I think everything you're doing is really just working together to keep getting the word out there and sharing your love of snow with other snow lovers.
Hey, absolutely. And we're going to use that as the point to wrap up this podcast. The former owner of UpstateSnow.com, Penn Mountain SnoRiders, MapledaleMotors.com, Barneveld, New York. If you need car, truck, SUV, or minivan, Dave is the one to see. He'll always take good care of you in upstate New York. Dave Gleasman, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Trail Talk Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rich.
All right. You've been listening to the Trail Talk Podcast here on UpstateSnow.com, where it's always
Thanks
snow.
for listening. For more podcasts and videos, visit UpstateSnow.com.